Hey there, this is Hannah from Daisy Farm Crafts, and in this video I wanted to quickly show you how I made these easy cotton pom-pom beanies. This was a pattern that my sister originally made about a year ago, and she used some kind of thicker, more wool yarn, but I also wanted to try it out using some lighter weight yarn. So these are made with Bernat Softee Cotton, which is a cotton acrylic blend yarn, and I used a size H 5mm crochet hook. So these hats can be made in any size, and to get started you just want to make a base chain that is about 1 inch longer than your desired hat height. After you work the first couple of rows, the length of your base chain tends to shrink if you're using this Softee cotton yarn. So for example, in my hats I made a medium adult size. So I wanted my hat height to be about 11.5 inches, so I started out with a base chain that was 12.5 inches. And then after I worked my first couple rows, it shrunk down to about 11.5. So I'm just going to make a small base chain right now just so I can show you the stitch that I used. So I'm just going to quickly chain about 10. And the main stitch of these hats is half double crochet. And normally I would start in the third chain from the hook, but I want my sides to be a little bit straighter. So I'm going to start in the second chain from the hook, yarn over, insert my hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops. So for this first row, I'm just going to work 1 half double crochet into each chain. And once I get to the end of the row, I'm just going to chain 1 and turn. And now I'm still going to work half double crochet, but I'm going to insert my hook into the front bottom loop only. So I'm going to work a half double crochet exactly the same way, but I'm going to insert my hook just underneath that front bottom loop that's running across the front of my work. And I just worked, directly into the first stitch. I'm not counting my turning chain as a stitch. And I'm just working underneath each of those front bottom loops to work my half double crochets. And this is the stitch that I'm going to be working the rest of the time on every row for my hats. And here I am on my last stitch, still working into that front bottom loop. And then again, just chain 1 and turn, and then you can see how it makes that really pretty braid across. And then I'm just going to do the same thing on the next row, inserting my hook into those front bottom loops. So I'm just going to repeat that front bottom loop half double crochet on every row until the number of rows on my rectangle measures what I need according to the size of hat that I want. So for a medium adult hat, you would work until your rectangle is about 19 inches. And for my hats, I worked about 78 rows until they measured what I needed. So here I'm just finishing off the last row of my big rectangle. and I've worked 78 rows, and I found that it's a little bit nicer looking to join the sides if you end on an even number of rows. So just something to think about. And now I'm gonna just chain one and tie off. Leave myself a really long tail, probably like 25 to 30 inches, because I need a tail long enough to be able to sew up the side and then also the top of my hat and to sew on a button. So you want to give yourself a pretty decently long tail. All right, so I'm gonna actually flip my work over so that my tail is in the top right corner. And then I'm going to fold my rectangle in half. And I'm going to just use my tapestry needle to sew these two sides together. And I found that it worked the best if at first I kind of went below the first stitch, kind of on the side, if that makes sense, before going across, just to work one stitch to help make sure the bottom of my hat is kind of even. And then I'm going to just start working into each of those stitches, and I'm gonna still work in the front bottom loop. And then on the other side, I am inserting my needle a little bit deeper into the base chain. So I'm kind of working in between those stitches, just so that it is a little bit more secure and tighter and doesn't make a gap when you are wearing your hat. But you can kind of just experiment and look at both sides of your hat and figure out the best place to insert your tapestry needle. And before you get too far, you might just want to quickly flip and make sure that the back is looking good. That's the side, I'm going to turn this inside out. So that's the side that's mostly going to be showing. So since I'm working into still the front bottom loop on this side, I want there to kind of be a braid going across to match the rest of the hat. So it's looking good. All right, now that I've sewn all the way up the side, I'm gonna just work into those last stitches. And now I'm going to start working around the top. So I'm just going to weave my tapestry needle in and out around the top. And it was easier for me if I just inserted my needle on the top of each of those braids, just so I could make sure I'm inserting my needle kind of into the same space every time, so that when I pull it tight, the hat will gather evenly. And if you start to run out of yarn, you can kind of also just pull it tight as you go to give yourself some more slack as you're going around. And now that I'm back to the beginning, I'm just going to pull this as tight as I can so that the hat gathers as tight as it will go. And then I'm just gonna tie a knot with my starting chain tail. And then I'm just gonna work a few stitches across the hole just to gather the hole in a little bit more. And then once I feel like that's pretty tight, then I'm going to sew on a button so that I can attach one of my fur pom-poms. So now I'm using a little bit smaller tapestry needle so that it'll fit through the holes of my button. And I'm just gonna attach it to the top of my hat by working kind of up and down through my hat, through each of the holes. I just kind of tried to make an X a couple of times across the holes to get my button sewed on there. And then once I felt like my button was secure, I just brought my tapestry needle underneath the button so I could pull up that tail. And then I kind of just wrapped the tail, the two tails around my button a couple of times and tied them together just to add a little bit of extra security. And then I just trimmed those tails, and now I can add my pom-pom and turn this hat inside out because I want the button to be on the underside. So I'm just going to use my crochet hook, kind of stick it up through the hole and grab that little elastic. And then I'm just going to wrap it around my button 2 or 3 times until it feels secure. And now I have a super comfy finished pom-pom beanie. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope this helps, especially if you're a beginner and you want to try making a hat for the first time. This is a great place to start. I love how these hats turned out, especially with this Bernat Softee Cotton yarn. It's just so comfortable and stretchy. So I think these hats would make some great gifts for sure. As usual, the full written pattern for these hats is on daisyfarmcrafts.com if you want to, print out that sizing chart so you can have it next to you as you're crocheting. That's on there. And if you make any of our patterns, please come share a picture with us on Facebook or Instagram using hashtag daisyfarmcrafts. We would love to see. Thank you so much and happy crocheting!